In this video, we're going to be creating a simple calculator using vanilla JavaScript, HTML, and Bootstrap to make it look nice. In case you're not familiar with the term vanilla JavaScript, it means to use JavaScript without any frameworks like React or Angular. It's just plain old JavaScript. This is what we're going to be building, a calculator. This calculator allows you to add two numbers together. For example, I could put the number 1 over here and the number 1 over here and click add, and our result is 2. Change that number to 2, change that number to a 3, and our result is 5. If you like my videos, please like, subscribe, and share. For this project, we're going to use Visual Studio Code and an awesome plugin called Live Server. What Live Server does is it creates a local web server. This local web server has a feature called Live Reload. This means that every time you click Save in Visual Studio Code, your browser will automatically refresh with the changes that you applied. Let's get started and set our project up. I'm going to show you two different ways that you can do this. One is from your terminal or Windows command prompt. What you can do here is get into the directory where you want to be. So I've created a folder called JavaScript and opened my command prompt there. What you can do then is type mkdir, which is going to create a directory, and we're going to create a directory called calculator. This is where we're going to be putting our project. Then we can switch into that directory, calculator, like so. And then what we can do if we have Visual Studio Code installed properly is type code space dot, hit enter, and that will open up your Visual Studio Code with the project. Now, the alternative way to do it, and this is the alternative way here, is that I've just opened up Visual Studio Code, and what I can do is I can open a folder. From here, it'll open up your Explorer or your Finder for Mac, and then you can select the folder or create a new folder where you want to put your project. I suggest making an empty folder where we're going to keep our project, such as my calculator here, which has no content in it, and open that folder up. Once that folder is open, we're presented with our project, which has no files in it currently. This over here is where our files will go, and there are none at this moment. Now that we have Visual Studio Code open with our project, we can go ahead and install the Live Server extension. In order to do that, what we're going to want to do is click on these blocks over here, extensions. So click on extensions, and then what we'll do is we want to search over here in the search bar for Live Server. Once you find Live Server, it'll be over here. Current version I'm using is 5.6.1. You'll want to go ahead and click the install button. Once you've clicked the install button, you might have to restart your Visual Studio Code. If not, you'll find out in the next step. Normally you have a button down here in the right corner which says Go Live. And if you don't have that button, don't worry about it because I'll show you how you can still start up your Live Server. Now that we got our Live Server extension installed, what we're going to do is we're going to go back up to the Explorer. So that's these two pieces of paper over here. We're going to find our calculator, so we'll say calculator over here, and we're going to click this little button here that adds a new file. So let's go ahead and create our first HTML page. We're going to create an index.html, and you'll notice my icons are different. That's because I have some extensions installed to make them look different. And to create a simple HTML template, we're going to hit the exclamation symbol right there and then go ahead and hit tab, and that'll set up a simple HTML document for us. Over here inside the body, we can just type hello world. I've reconfigured my screen here so it'll be easier to see my browser and Visual Studio Code at the same time. So over here, we're going to go ahead and start our web server up. If you don't have a button here that says Go Live, you can click on Go Live if you do have this button. But if you don't have it, what you can do is right click on your index.html file and then click Open with Live Server. When you click that, your browser will open up to this address 127.0.0.1, which is your local machine. And because it's your local computer, it's going to be running this little web server. Now you can see it says hello world, but if I delete hello world, save, my browser automatically refreshes. So any changes that I make in Visual Studio Code, when I click save, will automatically refresh my browser to show those changes. Let's go ahead and create our basic HTML layout. As recall, that page had 2 inputs and an add button and a little area where we showed the result. So let's build that out over here. We're going to create an input. We're going to give that input an identifier. That's what our JavaScript is going to use to find it and manipulate that input. We're going to call that input number1. And then we're going to make a self-closing tag because nothing needs to go between that. We'll put a plus over there. We'll put another input and we'll call that number2, like such, and self-closing. Then what we're going to do is we're going to also add a button. That button will have an identifier and we'll call it add button. And since it's a button, a different kind of element, what I'm going to do is actually put the text of that button in between the closing tag and the open tag, and we'll call it add as such. Below this area where we have the 2 text boxes and the button, we're going to want to add the div over here. And this div will bring us onto the next line. So if I just type the letter A and click save there, because I love this auto update, you can see that's on the next line. So what we'll do inside this div, which is moving everything to the next line, is we're going to put a span. And that span will contain the result when we add the 2 numbers from the 2 text boxes. Over here, we're going to call this, we're going to also give it an identifier so that our JavaScript can get that span and put a value in there. We're going to call that result text area. And then we'll also just give it a little title over there. So result space span, and then that's where we would see the result. And this sets up our basic HTML page that we're going to be using in order to create this project. Now that we have this basic HTML layout, we can go ahead and add our JavaScript. After we add our JavaScript, we'll then add Bootstrap to make this calculator look. To keep our JavaScript simple, what we're going to do is we're going to place it directly inside of our HTML file. Typically, you would put your JavaScript in a separate file, but we're going to keep it here. So inside of the body tag, this is what represents our entire HTML we built over here with the inputs and the add button. Right below or right above the closing tag of body, go create a script tag. That script tag is where we're going to put all of our JavaScript. We are going to start by creating variables. These variables will tie back to the inputs on the screen. So we're going to create one variable for this input, one for this input, one for the button, and then one for this text area where we're going to insert the result of adding the 2 numbers together. So we're creating a variable for each item that we want to manipulate on the page. Let's get started with that. So creating our first variable over here, we're going to call it a const. Const number1 input. And number1 input is going to be equal to, well, something called a document. What's a document? Well, it's a special object that JavaScript uses in order to represent the entire page. So the document you can think of as this HTML document. It's representing it. And then on that page, that document, we can say on that HTML page, find me something that has an element which is a particular ID. Well, in this situation, we have number1. Number1 is a thing that we're looking for. So this will say document, got element by ID. Well, what do we have on our input here? An identifier, an ID. And that ID is number1. And then this number1 will be equal to that. Now, don't worry about whether or not I have const here, or if I have var, or I have let. Sure, they have different usages and meanings, but we're going to just stick with the fact that I'm creating a variable. So don't worry about const, but we're going to use const for now over here. Then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go ahead, get input number2, say that's equal to document, oops, spell that right, get element by ID, and you can see our IntelliSense pops up and helps us type these things out, so we can just click on them or move our cursor there copy and paste, I recommend just copying and pasting it. No, there will be no typo errors and you won't have to worry about that. We'll do the same thing for our button because we want to know when that button gets clicked. So we're going to get what we call a reference or create a variable that points to that button. Do the very same thing here. Go ahead, copy and paste that identifier so that you don't make a mistake. And then lastly, the thing that we're looking for is that result. And we're going to call that the result text area. And the result text area is going to be equal to the same thing, document.getElementById. And then over here, we'll get that value, paste it in over there. And now we have our variable set up. I'll even put a comment over here, and this is something that doesn't get executed. And we'll just say that these are our variables. Now I do have a special plugin installed right now. You may have noticed every single time I have lots of tabs or spaces or things like that. I have something installed called Prettier. I'm not going to be showing you in this video how to set it up, but I will show you real quick. If we go to extensions over here, go over here to Prettier, and we search for Prettier, you'll see that it's a code formatter. So this is what I have installed if you also want to install it in your project. It's an awesome project that just formats your document as you're working on it. All right, this is what we've been waiting for. Let's go ahead and get that add button working. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, we want to listen and know when that add button gets clicked. So the way that we do that is we need to add something called an event listener. So right over here, we've created a variable, and that variable is called add button. So below our variables that we just defined, let's go add some functionality. We have that add button, and then there's something called add event listener. And you can see my IntelliSense pops up and gives me a hint and says, yeah, that exists. Now, what we're listening for, we need to give it two variables. One is, what are we listening for? We're going to listen for a click. You could listen for a double click. You could listen for a mouse over. You can respond to different events that you can add to any element on HTML. So this first part is, what event are we listening for? We're listening for click. Good. Then we need to give it a function. So I'm going to give it a function over here. So that function will be executed when click happens. For example, inside of here, what I could do is I could type alert. And I could say anytime the alert button gets clicked, let's go ahead and print something on the screen. Let's go show an alert. Go click add over here, and whoa, we get an alert. It popped up. It says that the website is saying hello anytime I click that add button. But that's not the functionality we want. We want to add two numbers together. What's the other little thing we want to do? We want to write a result. We want to write something beside here after add gets clicked. Well, let's start with that. We're going to take a step backwards. The result text area, that's the variable we created up here above. It has a property called inner text. Remember, we created a span. So what we're going to do is we're going to insert some text between the opening and closing of this element, this result text area. And we're going to insert some text. And once again, I'll go with the simple text of hello. And hello, when we insert that over there, let's go ahead and click that add button. And now it says hello. And that's what it does. Every single time I click it, it's just doing the same thing over and over. And that's why you don't see it changing. But we added that text on the screen, hello, over here. In reality, we're going to see some number result. That's what we're really looking for over here. We're expecting a result when we add some numbers together. Now, using what we know about these variables, we're going to get number 1 and number 2. So let's go ahead and get those values. Once again, I'm going to create another variable over here that extracts from, we're going to call it value1. And value1 is going to extract whatever we typed over here. So number1.input, let's get that value. And then const, we'll do another one, and we'll do value2 is equal to, guess what? Number 2, so that's our second text box. Our second text box on the screen over here is represented by this variable over here, which we find by going to document.getElementById. and then we type number2.input.value. So that will get us these two values. And then in the result, what we want to do is we want to say value1 plus value2, and then get a result. So let's try that out. What happens when I go 1 plus 1, and we click add? We get 11. We're not supposed to get 11, we're supposed to get 2. That doesn't make sense. So what's happening here? Well, number1.input.value is not a number. It's getting a string. I could actually write hello, and then I could put a space over here and write Adam. And then it says result is hello Adam. So what we're actually doing when you got 11 is we combined 1 and 1 together as if it was a string. This is what we're getting. We're getting this. And then we're getting this. And then over here, if I show you on the next line, what we're really getting is this plus this is going to be equal to 11 because we're combining two strings together. So that's what's happening over here. In order to correct this and fix this, we need to convert whatever values inside of here into a number. Now we can easily do that in JavaScript, and I'll show you how. What we're going to do is we're going to take this input, the number that comes out of it, and we're going to wrap it in this number. So we get the value, and then we call number, and it passes it in, and it returns a number. So instead of being 1 like this inside of a string, it's just going to be equal to 1 like that. And 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. So now we'll do the same thing over here. We'll do number. So this will convert this into a number. Close that bracket before the semicolon. And then what I'm going to do is let's delete this over here. Click save. You can see our screen refreshed. We got rid of our values. 1 plus 1. And that's equal to 2. So there you go. We're able to take two values from these text boxes, change them from a string to a number, put them together, and then display that in the result text area that we created. And let's just clean this little typo up over here. So Prettier did something I didn't want it to, so we'll get rid of those text I had there. And there you go. This is what the final solution looks like over here with the HTML and the JavaScript. Let's go ahead and make our project look nice by using Bootstrap. So navigating to the Bootstrap website over here, we're going to be using this CSS framework called Bootstrap. So you can either download Bootstrap and then add it to your project over here beside your index.html file. Or what we can simply do is use a link from a CDN called a content delivery network, such as this. So if we scroll down, we'll see Bootstrap CDN. So since we're just doing a simple project, we don't really need to include it in our project. What we'll do is we'll grab the CSS only. So over here, you'll see that there's this here, and we're going to grab this. So everything to the end, and just that one line. What you'll end up with is inside your head over here. You can put it above the title or below the title, doesn't really make a difference. What we've done is we've added this link. And what it does is it contains an href over here, which is a URL that goes to where the CSS for Boot. With Bootstrap in hand, now we can go ahead and style our project. All of our HTML is over here, above our script tag. So this is our HTML. This is our JavaScript over here. Let's make our HTML look nice. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this entire stuff over here inside of another div. And let me also show our project. So here we go. We can see our project at the same time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a div. So I'm going to take the closing tag there and bring it to the end. And that will then encompass everything here. You'll see once I click save, it'll format it nicely. Now inside of this div, it contains our inputs, our button, and our other div. Here's the magic. We're going to start using some Bootstrap. So the first item we're going to use is a container. We're going to say all of our stuff goes in a container. Now you can see if I remove the letter R, everything looks okay. But once I grab R over there and I type container, You're gonna see Bootstrap starts taking effect. Now it's added a little padding or margins here on the side around our content. Next, what we're going to do is let's go ahead and add an H1. This is in Bootstrap, just a regular HTML component. What we're going to do is we're going to add a title, just like we had in the beginning of the video. We have calculator, perfect. Now let's just use a little regular styling to go ahead and center that item on the screen. So we're going to use text align over here, and we're just going to type in center. Now calculator is in the middle of the screen. So that's pretty good. Next step is let's make those input boxes look nice. So inside of Bootstrap, so Bootstrap is pretty easy to use. If you want to figure out what those styles are that I'm going to be applying, one way to do that is you go to documentation. The documentation is excellent. And I will make this just a little bit smaller so you can see what the full size website looks like. And here you can see we have a nav bar on the left-hand side that gives us more information about what we're working on. So for example, if I want to go to components, we can see all these different things that we can add to our page. Now the way this works is that it shows you an example over here. Then below there's some HTML. So for example, we're like, wow, I really like how this alert looks. Let's go ahead and copy that alert there. Let's go to our application. And we'll just say inside of this container, maybe below the calculator, I'm going to paste that HTML in. Since we have the CSS here, and now I'm using something created by Bootstrap, I'm going to click Save. Go back to our application. And there you are, a simple primary alert. Check it out. This is the code that we just copy and pasted. That's what's wonderful about Bootstrap. Documentation is so perfect. You can go in, copy it, and then manipulate it for your own need. Also, it is great to understand how it works, but you can see we have alert, alert primary. If I do alert danger, it changes to red, and we can have a little message up there. So let's go ahead and remove this because we're not using that. We're going to try and copy the same style we had earlier. What we're going to do is I need an input. So I need to know how input boxes look for Bootstrap and how I can make a nice one. Instead of input, I'm actually going to search for form. And then you can see here are my different ways to create a really nice looking form with a title or even some subscript over here. And these text boxes look much nicer than my text boxes, I would say. So what we're going to do is we're just going to give it the generic form control class. So class equals form control. And I'm not going to click save yet. Go back to our document over here. Click save. And you can see that input 2, number 2 over here, looks quite nice, taking up the full width of the screen by default. And let's do exactly the same thing with number 1. So over here, here's input number 1. We're going to say class form control, click save. And you can see that also looks pretty nice. Let's make that a little bit smaller so that our code is a little bit neater over here. And then next, what else do we need? Well, we want to make this button look nicer as well. So let's go ahead and make that look good too. Well, go back to our documentation over here and type in button. What I love about this is, look, we can have these really nice looking buttons, and it gives us an example of how to do it. So if I have a button, what I can do is I can do BTN for the class, and then I can do one of these BTN primary, BTN secondary to give it different colors. So let's go ahead and do a BTN and BTN primary for a blue button. Go back to our button over here, go class equals, paste that in, and we get BTN, BTN primary. Go back to our application, and there you go. We have a nice looking button. Another thing that we can do is we can do a block with a button. So this means that the button will take up the full width. Within the documentation over here, it explains you can do a block level button. Well, how do we do that? Well, BTN primary, and we can do BTN block. So let's go back to our button. We have BTN, BTN primary, and then go ahead BTN block. Go back here and check that out. That already looks so much nicer. Another thing we can do is there's some utility methods. We can add some margin above or below our buttons. So let's go ahead using Bootstrap's method of doing this. So we can btn 3 above. So we're going to add some margin below us. So you see result will go a little bit lower. And then we're going to add a little bit of margin above us. So mt-3. And now you can see the button. There's a little bit of spacing above it, which makes it look so much nicer. For our result area, if you recall, it was a green area. So that looked just like an alert. Let's scroll back up, go into our search, type alert, and now we have how to create an alert. So just as we had before, what's an alert? Well, an alert is a div who has a class of alert, an alert primary, or alert secondary, or alert success to give it a different color. So on our alert over here, this area where we're going to be putting our resulting text, well, we don't want that to be just on the number that we get back. We want it to be on this entire div. So let's go ahead, add that class. We'll type alert as it has over here, and then space, so we can see this happen in real time over here. There we are. So alert, and then alert dash success. Alert dash success makes a green alert. Then we can go ahead and take our two numbers and combine them and do that. Well, that plus button still seems kind of small. So this isn't Bootstrap, but let's go ahead and add an H1. That's a heading tag. And we're going to put that plus in between the H1s there. And now we have a big plus. And if we wanted to, we could also maybe center that and center it. Why not? It'd make it look much nicer. You can do a text align and do center. And there you go. Now we can add two numbers together. We get 24 and we get 25. So now we've built a solution that looks much nicer than what we had before. If you recall, we had some simple text boxes on the screen. We've gone from simple text boxes to this nice looking solution by using just a little bit of Bootstrap CSS. The other benefit of using Bootstrap is that you can make responsive websites. In this particular example over here, it's on a single page and it's kind of small and it looks nice. And then as we grow the page bigger, what you'll see is that it grows as well. When we get to different sizes, it'll do different things. So this will fit on an iPad, this will fit on a phone, this will fit on a desktop. It'll center itself always as it does right now, but if you have the width and space, it'll just continue to grow even bigger like that. You can see where it has media queries that it's using to decide the size of your content. And this is another benefit of using Bootstrap. In the description, I'll be providing links to the completed solution. And if you enjoyed my videos, please like, subscribe, and share.